We could talk about the chapter of my life you've missed, about how I ghosted, about how I finished high school, graduated, all that cool stuff. Or we could talk about books, which is what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Guys, I'm literally laughing at myself because the setup of my camera right now is so ratchet. Like, it's giving Nokia touch lights. Like, I'm actually kind of sweating because it's hot. I feel like the hoodie's a moment, so we're gonna keep it on. But I intended to do these videos like month by month. The books I read in January, then February, then March. Laziness, school, and I'm a really bad YouTuber, so what I'll do instead is talk about all the books I've read so far this year. I'm not going to be giving any spoilers, so in case you want to read any of these books, this video is spoiler free. So for each book, I'm just going to talk about the book, like what it's about. I'm going to talk about my thoughts, things I liked, things I didn't like. I'm going to give you guys one quote from each book. You can kind of have an idea of like the writing stuff. I start off with Most of All You by Mia Sheridan. I read another of her books last year called Archer's Voice, which I loved. Most of All You is about this boy called Gabriel. Something tragic happens in his past. People know who he is because of this thing that happened to him. He has like a problem with like physical like affection. He basically goes to a strip club because he wants to meet someone who can help him. He goes to the strip club and then he meets this girl, sparks this whole thing, but the girl has also gone through things in her life, and then something actually happens to her, and then he happens to kind of be around when this thing happens, and it just kind of sparks like this whole like interaction between them. I will say this book has a lot of trigger warnings, so I would definitely say look up all the trigger warnings. Pretty heavy. This book is a really sad book, but like in the best way possible. The storyline is well thought out. Like, the love story is very unique. It's beautifully written. Gabriel has a special place in my heart. He's literally an angel. Something I really like about Mia Sheridan and the way she writes, especially in this book, is the way she talks about certain feelings and states of mind. I admire it because I know that I understand what emotion she's trying to describe, but I would never be able to describe it the way that she does. A quote from this book that I will leave you guys with: "A few leaves fluttered from the trees, twirling lazily in the light breeze, and I felt a gentle falling inside me too. I wondered how trees knew to let go of the things they no longer needed, and I wondered if I could do that as well." Definitely recommend if you love a good romance. Give this book 5 out of 5 stars. And guys, I will say one thing about my ratings is that I don't really rate books based on anything. Like, I don't have a criteria. It makes me like not too critical because I'm not an English lit major. Like, I don't know anything about literature. When I'm done reading the book, exact emotion I'm feeling, that's how many stars I give it. Like, if I finish a book and I'm like, wow, like I'm speechless, that's automatically 5 stars. If I finish a book and I'm like, finally, probably like 3 stars, 3.5. If I finish a book and I'm like, that was a good one, but I just need to read something else, like 4 or 4.5. So it really just depends on how I'm feeling when I'm done with the book. I don't have like anything I compare it to. Most of All You is a book about like overcoming, rising like past like your struggles. Like the fact that like these two characters didn't like depend on each other to like grow from like what they went through. Individually like overcame their own like fears. And the next book I read this year is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Book I give a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So this book is basically about like this girl, and then one day she gets invited to the will reading of this really rich man that passed away. She's like obviously confused because she doesn't know this man. She's not related to this man. She's never heard of him before. This is not a spoiler. This is basically how the book starts. When she gets to the will reading, she finds out that this man has basically disinherited his entire family and left all of his assets and everything he owns to her, which is like, what the hell? She doesn't know him. No one knows her. Like, even the family is confused. And this book is a lot like Knives Out, the movie, which is a movie I love so much. Disinheriting his family obviously sparks a lot of conflict, follows you trying to figure out why, plot twists and like the big reveals. It's just so good. Like, it engulfs you so much. The pacing of this book is magnificent. It took me a moment to get into this book because there are a lot of characters to familiarize yourself with, but once you get into it, it's amazing. I think that's actually why I gave it 4.5. Love how everything connects to each other really well. All the foreshadowing and everything, all the way from the beginning of the book, making sense at the end. Like, it's chef's kiss. The romance subplot, which I actually love. It's like a love triangle thing, and I feel like it's the kind of book that will get you out of a reading slump. So the quote I have from this book is pretty short: "The morality of an action depends ultimately and only on its outcomes." Guys, you could have a whole hour conversation about that quote. Then I read The Horthand Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and this is actually the sequel. It's actually a trilogy. The 3rd book doesn't come out till August this year. Horthand Legacy basically follows where the last book ended, and I actually love this book more than the first book, so I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I can't even give like a synopsis. This book basically just continues. You find out more things about the family. A lot of secrets are uncovered. It's a book about like family, class structure, how like material wealth has such an effect on like people's relationships with each other. You can just tell that the author thought out every single detail of the plot. Like you can tell they had like a whole mind map and everything is interconnected, and the love triangle in this book is further explored. Like I finished this book a lot faster than the first one because I was more familiar with like all the characters. I'm gonna be moving on to February. So the first book I read in February is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste NG. This book starts with a fire. See, this house is on fire. The house that's on fire belongs to the Richardsons. Don't worry, not a spoiler. Everyone's kind of wondering like who set this house on fire, like what's happening. Like takes us back to the beginning of how this came about, and you kind of like figure out what actually led up to the moment of the fire. Like that's the whole point of the book. This book is set in the 90s, by the way. I live in this city called Shaker Heights, a town where like everything is like planned and structured. This woman called Mia and her daughter Pearl, they move about a lot. They don't have like a specific home or like area they live in, so they end up in Shaker Heights. They don't actually have anywhere to stay, and they end up staying at Mrs. Richardson's other house. Mia, the mother, also ends up working for Miss Richardson. It kind of like connects their two worlds. Mia works in their house. Obviously she's gonna learn more about the family, and her daughter becomes friends with the family. Beginning of the book, Pearl and Mia basically return the key to Miss Richardson, and the next day the house is on fire. So you're kind of like, who did this? What happened? What led up to this moment? Why would Pearl and Mia suddenly move out? This book is about family. It's about motherhood. It's about motherhood, class structure. It's about wealth. It's just about everything. It's about race. So the chapters are really long and like give you like a plot twist, like go on this like spiral where they explain everything. And I get why the story is told the way it is, but it's just really overwhelming to read. It's a really engaging storyline, but I wish there was a lot more dialogue, which is the reason I love the show. And trust me guys, I'm a big believer in book is greater than movie. Every single time people talk about a movie, I'm the one that's gonna be like, okay, but did you read the books? I'll say guys, this show, chef's kiss. It's just so good. Like the acting, the emotion. One of our leading characters, Mrs. Richardson, is played by Reese Witherspoon, and I love Reese. So immediately seeing her, I was like, yeah, I know I'm gonna love this show. But the show more than the book is like how much dialogue there is. Like you kind of like see a lot more depth to the characters. And something that makes this book really interesting is how there's really no main character. Let's say Mia and like Miss Richardson, like two main characters, but then at the same time, like there are other people who you think are quite irrelevant, have their entire storyline that's told to us. This book actually put me in a reading slump because I read it for a really long time, so I guess that's why my rating is not as high. If you don't want to read this book, which I think you should definitely watch the show. I think it's on Amazon Prime Video. I have my girl Kerry Washington, love her, she's literally gorgeous. Lexi Underwood plays Pearl. Quote I have from this book: the carpet at her feet was soft, the sofa beneath her was patterned with roses. Outside, a morning dog cooed from the bird feeder, and a Cadillac glided to a dignified stop at the corner. She wondered which was the real world. Like, come on guys. Next book I read in February was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This book I love. I give this a 5 out of 5 because I read this book literally so fast. A girl called Macy, and her dad basically bought like this vacation house. The first time she goes there, she actually meets one of her neighbors in the closet in her bedroom in this house, and his name is Elliot, and she's like, okay, like who are you, like what are you doing in my closet type thing. Shy, mysterious. It's just like a really weird interaction. Elliot and Macy then become friends, bond over like reading and everything, like, you know, little kid friendship. Now coming to the current day, Macy is no longer in contact with Elliot. She doesn't speak to him, has like new relationships, new friends, new everything. She doesn't go back to the house or anything. Wondering why, because the book basically flashes back and forth, and then all of a sudden she meets Elliot again. Like, oh, weird, because you know she hasn't seen him in years. Guys, they bond over reading. Like that has to be like perfect like romance story. That's basically my favorite thing about the entire book. Just left wondering what happened and why Elliot and Macy don't talk anymore. Like it flashes between the present and the past, so you see them growing up together and how their friendship evolves as kids, and then you go back to the present when they're trying to figure out what happened and why they stopped talking to each other. Childhood friends to lovers is just so wholesome because it's like so relatable. The awkwardness like at a young age, like the little mannerisms like as kids when you like someone, it's like it's just done so well in this book. Like they didn't just start the book and expect us to believe that these two people loved each other as kids. We actually get to like experience that and kind of like watch them, why it has such an effect in their present day lives. Simplicity of this love story, yet the complexity of their distance is the reason I love this book. My quote from this book is: admissions make feelings intensify simply because they're giving the space to breathe. Admissions lead to love, and admitting love is like tying yourself to a train track. We're gonna go to March, and in March I read the infamous 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This book was an automatic 5 out of 5. I finished reading this book, I literally threw it across the room because what was that? About this woman called Evelyn Hugo, who was basically like a Hollywood actress. She was really famous, and was famous like in like the 60s and everything. Like, present day, Evelyn Hugo is retired. She doesn't act anymore. She's an old lady basically. write a memoir. Is it a memoir? A biography? I really don't know. About her life. She wants the specific right. Like she doesn't want anyone else from the firm. And about Evelyn Hugo's life, about each and every husband, and how they met, what happened, why they divorced, and why she got a new husband. You basically just learn about the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I love how quickly it gets to the point. It's very fast-paced. You also kind of wonder like, why does she want this particular writer? This book makes you feel literally everything. I read this book in like a day and a half because I was that invested. My quote from this book: people think intimacy is about sex. Intimacy is about truth. When you realize you can tell someone your truth, you can show yourself to them. When you stand in front of them bare and their response is, "You're safe with me," that's intimacy. Like guys, that is literally beautiful. In March was The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. The trigger warnings in this book are so heavy. The entire book is a trigger warning. Just look it up before you read it. Look it up before you literally listen to me talk about it like right now. The book is about a girl called Eden. This book starts the morning after Eden is by her brother's best friend, because it's kind of told in 4 parts of high school: freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. It's called The Way I Used to Be because how after this thing happened to her, she just completely changes. Like her entire world changes, her entire world capsizes, and like, you know, she's just not the way she used to be. See how she grows up with this trauma and how it manifests in literally every single relationship in her life. Romantic relationships, family, friends, everything. Something I wrote in my notes about this book is that usually when I underline quotes in books, I highlight my favorite parts and favorite quotes and just things that stuck out to me. For this book, I highlighted the parts that hurt me, like literally, guys. But this book has a very clear message, and it just shows how like one thing and one event in your life can change the entire trajectory of your life. And my only critic of this book, and I guess why I couldn't give it 5 stars, is because this book is literally just a series of unfortunate events. I guess it's somewhat realistic in a sense where people always say there's light at the end of the tunnel, but like how easy is it to actually reach that light? And it's kind of a double-edged sword because Eden can be so annoying, but at the same time you have to sympathize with her. Some of the relationships in this book are just very one-dimensional, and I feel like they could have explored some certain like plot lines. For example, not a plot line, but there's a point where Eden stops calling her parents by mom and dad and she starts calling them by their first names. I feel like we could have explored this so much and it would have been like so interesting, but they just didn't, and we're just meant to accept it. A quote from this book says, "Because whatever he thinks I am not. Whatever he thinks my body is, it isn't. My body is a torture chamber. It's a crime scene." Then we're gonna go to April, which is the last month. And in April, I read 3 really good books. The first book I read in April is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I don't remember her name. I think it's Ava. Basically, Ava is a writer. She's the author of this 10 novel romance series or something. When Ava is younger, she meets a guy like in school or something. Teenagers, when this happens, they go through so much together in like such little time, and he basically leaves and she never knows why. And this book's that like flashes back between the present and the past and their friendship and like what actually happened and led up to the moment in which he left her. Him leaving her so long ago had an effect on her today. They kind of reconnect, how they kind of like, you know, face the ghost of their past. Like a big part of reading for me is like an escape from reality. So it's very interesting that, you know, this book actually mentioned things that exist in my world, because I'm like, you know, I didn't really like it at first. It kind of bugged me, but then I got used to it and it was okay. This book reveals to you a lot of raw emotion. The writing style in this book is impeccable, and the way they transition between the past and the present, it's done so well. This book is so cool because it's a book about like book authors. It's definitely like a book for people that read. This book basically tears your heart out, but in like such a lovable and perfect way. One thing I love about this book, the characterization. I feel like every character is so vivid and they have so much depth. And one thing that I rarely see but really appreciate in a romance book is when the characters are smitten for each other's depth, because there are a lot of books where they introduce to us these supposed starstruck lovers, but like simply physical and superficial, and there's really nothing to it. Like it's very one-dimensional. Like, but this book does the exact opposite. Shows and explains to us why these 2 human beings should be so consumed by one another. But the quote from this book: "A tree grows its branches out until it touches the tips of the next closest tree, and they're linked forever. Because if they're really close, their roots grow together. They're so intertwined underneath, and no matter what happens above the ground, they stay connected." How like experiences shape the people that we are today. The next book I read this month was Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. If you know Sally Rooney, or if you've heard about her, you might know that she does not use quotation marks in her writing. I won't lie, when I first started reading, it was a bit overwhelming, but like once you get into it, like you actually like it and you understand why. It's about this girl, I don't remember her name, but I remember her best friend's name, which is Bobby. Basically, this girl and Bobby were previously in a relationship, but like they're not anymore, and their best friends basically get like, they meet like this married couple. They basically get involved with the married couple, and like they kind of like, their lives kind of intertwine and become heavily connected. Like this book is about everything. It's about love, it's about intimacy, friendship, it's about relationships, but it's done in like such a casual way. I feel like a lot of books that people love, they're obsessed with certain character, but like in this book, literally every character is like borderline unlikable. It's kind of funny to like the book, but I feel like that's what makes it so entertaining. There's a lot of political conversation in this book, kind of annoying but also kind of interesting to read about. I really like the writing style in this book, like listening to someone speak to you or like text to you, because you know when someone's like talking to you and like telling you like a story, they don't use quotation marks when they're speaking, and you kind of have to use your brain to like understand what exactly is someone's speech and what isn't. It's really fast paced. Conversations with Friends is actually becoming a show. I don't think it's out. I think it's out yet, I'm not sure. I guess I understand why people don't like Sally Rooney's writing. It's definitely for me. And my quote from this book said, gradually the waiting began to feel less like waiting and more like this was simply what life was, a distracting task undertaken, what the thing you're waiting for continues to not happen. This is a Sally Rooney stan account. I'm going to read everything she writes. Last book I have in this significantly long video is Before the Coffee Gets Cold, but this is basically Japanese literature that's translated to English. English is basically about like this cafe, and this cafe basically has this particular seat that you sit on. Around this seat you can time travel, go like to the past and everything, and obviously the time traveling comes with a bunch of dumb rules. You have to sit in this seat the entire time. You can't go anywhere else. You can only visit people who have actually been to the cafe before. No matter what you do in the past, you cannot change the present. A lot of people want to time travel so they can like, you know, change things that happen now. So the most important rule is the time limit. So for you to time travel, they pour you a cup of coffee, and then your time limit is basically before the coffee gets cold. You have to be done with your interaction and return back to the present before your coffee gets cold. If you don't like follow all these rules, like obviously there's like repercussions, but I'll just let you guys read about that on your own, because since there's so many rules, you kind of wonder like who would want to use this. I think there's like a mother and daughter, there's like a husband and wife, sisters. Basically written in 4 parts. It's basically showing you like the stories of like these 4 different sets of people, why said person actually wants to travel back in time. It's kind of cool because they're kind of all connected in a way, but you have to read to find this out. It's a relatively short book. It's about like family, it's about love, it's about relationships, it's about sacrifice. It's just one of those books that's just so simple but so good. It's like normal human beings in like a normal human situation, fantasy elements, like the concept of time travel. It was one of the simplest and easiest 5 stars I've ever given, like teaching about like some Japanese cultures, which I thought was really interesting. Like a good book with a good plot, with good writing and good characters, and it's just the simple things that go a long way, honestly. My quote says, water flows from high places to low places. That is the nature of gravity. Emotions also seem to act according to gravity. When in the presence of someone with whom you have a bond and to whom you have entrusted your feelings, hard to lie and get away with. The truth just wants to come flowing out. It is much easier to conceal sadness from a stranger or from someone you don't trust. So guys, those are all the books I've read this year. I definitely read a lot of good books this year. They have pretty high ratings. Any book recs, any books that you want me to read or you think I would definitely like, please comment them down below. I'm always looking forward to expanding. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a few book recommendations. Allah can get you to start reading, because like kind of cool to say that I have bought or picked out 90% of the books that I own. I have to make reading my entire personality trait, because who wouldn't? I need to go wash my face and shower. I look atrocious. But thank you for watching. I love you guys so much. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.